AM, let's hit the throttle. Oh my God, yeah, hands going up. Let's hit the dance floor again.
Wild like.
Hello, welcome to The Wild Review. I'm The Wild Reviewer, and today I'm going to review a thing. I am very orange. The lighting in here is weird. So, take a moment to check out the title of this episode. It's gonna be another one of those, because I haven't talked about this show more than enough times. Actually, when you think about it, it's pretty interesting I'm talking about it again, because last week I stated that I don't talk about Disney shows very much, and yet Raven's Home and Lab Rats, they're both Disney. How odd is that? So while I was enjoying my 4-month break not doing the Wild Review, I got a bunch of comments asking where I am, what have I been doing, and then I just got a bunch of comments of people agreeing with me on stuff that I've said. Some were disagreeing with what I said, which is completely fine. This is all opinion. This is not fact. Just want to make that clear. I'm open to opinions, your criticisms, anything. This is an opinion-based place. Just want to get that out there. I got a bunch of comments and requests, and one of the requests specifically that I was given, I don't remember who the person was, they suggested that I list my top 10 Lab Rat episodes that I consider to be my favorite, which honestly isn't a bad idea. I've talked about Lab Rats numerous of times, going over the whole entire show, talking about the finale, the crossover they had with Mighty Med, and even the spin-off show that only lasted one season, which is a bit unfortunate. But I've never really talked about the episodes that I like the most, because there are a few of them. So that's what I'm going to be doing today. This is my top 10 favorite Lab Rats episodes, starting from number 10 and working my way down all the way to number 1. Just to clarify, there is no specific thing regarding this list. I'm not categorizing them from, oh, this episode was really funny, or this episode had a lot of good actions and stuff, because one episode may be really funny and then the next one may not be funny. That has nothing to do with the list. This top 10 list is a list of 2 episodes that I just found really interesting. There's no specific, this was funny, this wasn't, just what I think was interesting. Let's start with number 10. Number 10. Parallel Universe. I'm a geek when it comes to sci-fi, and if this show doesn't make itself known to be science fiction, then this episode will definitely make it known as science fiction, or at least have a science fiction element in it. The show is science fiction. It's bionic teenagers. It's science fiction! This episode focuses on Leo getting sucked into Donald's new device that leads him into a parallel universe to where his mom is the scientist, his dad is the nerdy assistant, and he has bionic abilities. As for Adam, Bree, and Chase, they are just normal humans. They have nothing to do with the Davenports at all. In fact, they even have different last names. I like this episode specifically because I'm a geek when it comes to all that sort of parallel universe stuff. I like seeing shows morph their characters differently. I like seeing stuff like this, taking a look into alternate universes, answering the questions, how would Adam, Bree, and Chase be like if they were born without bionic powers? Or how would Leo act if he did have bionic powers? Of course, that specific question would be answered later on in the series when he does get bionics, but it was pretty cool to see all the characters act in different ways than they normally would. Donald is usually very smart, but in this episode he was geeky, he was very worried, he was the complete opposite of himself, and those are episodes that I specifically like when it comes to shows that do parallel universe or alternate dimension episodes. So that one, of course, had to be on the list. I'm a sucker for those. Number 9. Crush, Crop, and Burn. I'm really hoping that's the title. I mostly just associate it with it as the pilot. Of course the pilot has to be on this list as well. It's the first episode. This is what starts everything. The pilot is just an innocent little Disney pilot. It kind of shows what the show will be like, but it obviously won't show the dark stuff until, of course, after the first season ends, which is exactly what this show does. This episode introduces all the characters and introduces our main plot of the whole entire series. A man named Donald Davenport marries a woman named Tasha who has a son named Leo, and they all move into Donald's big mansion. In the basement of this mansion live 3 teenagers who have bionic abilities, and Leo, being very fascinated about them, wants to give them a normal life, so they follow him to high school where they realize they want to live a normal life while also keeping their bionic powers. It's honestly seen as one of those typical Disney pilots, like I said. It's very common that when you have a show with this sort of plot, that will normally be the first episode, that they obviously don't want to have just this life. They want to be like all the other kids. They want to go to high school, which is exactly what happens in this episode. Yeah, there's a little drama to the fact that Davenport doesn't think they're ready for the real world, and he doesn't want the secret to be let out, so he sends them away to Antarctica, I think it was, or the North Pole, somewhere cold. Overall, it's just a generic Disney pilot, and yeah, some things are funny. It's interesting to see how the characters are when in the first episode, because a lot has changed from when the pilot started all the way to the ending, even to Elite Force. It's not one of the best episodes, but it definitely is one of my favorites because it did start something that ended up being a really big hit. Number 8. And then there were 4. This episode aired near the end of the series, so it's kind of a shame that this little arc didn't expand longer. Like, maybe this episode should have been in the middle of season 4 rather than near the end of it. But the title kind of says it all. There's another bionic kid. In this episode, we learn that Douglas just didn't have Adam, Bree, and Chase. He had a 4th child named Daniel. The character Daniel was, I guess, alright. I mean, we didn't really know him that long, and he didn't make an appearance in Elite Force, so there really wasn't any character structure with him. We just knew that he was the 4th bionic kid in the Davenport family. The reason why he wasn't in the whole series entirely is because after Donald took Adam, Bree, and Chase, he didn't realize that there was a 4th kid that Douglas had, and so Douglas gave him off to another family so this way nothing bad could happen to him. Which kind of shows that he does in fact care for his kids no matter who they are. Cool concept, but honestly, I kind of saw it coming. I knew there was another secret within the show, so I really wasn't surprised to see that there was a 4th bionic kid. So pretty good, not many funny jokes, but still pretty interesting. Number 7. Mission Space. This is the season finale of season 1, and things don't really get dark, but this does open up big questions for some of the characters, and it's slowly leading into the big adventures that we're actually going to focus on throughout the series. In this episode, Adam, Bree, and Chase are sent up to space to work on Davenport's space station and help people that are stuck up there. Meanwhile, Marcus, who's the new character around this time, is invited to the Davenport's house and basically is left there for Leo to watch him because the teens have to go do something. At this point, Marcus doesn't know anything about their bionic powers, or at least we have that mindset, and there is obviously some tension between Marcus and Leo due to the previous episode, Concert in a Can, which was Marcus's first episode. This episode's pretty unique because Marcus discovers the lab during this episode, which is a big shock for all of us, and we didn't really know where this was leading to, but it wasn't until the end of the episode when we found out that Marcus may not be who he's portraying to be, and that completely just changes the tone of the show. That tells us that there may just be a bigger villain coming into the show, seeing that Marcus was talking to some guy in a chair that was all shadowy, who in this case is Douglas. Pretty interesting at the time, and it's pretty satisfying, the result at the end of all of it. The reason why it's on the list is because it does start off the dark tones of Lab Rats, because Lab Rats does get pretty dark. And this honestly is a great way to start it all off. Number 6. The Vanishing. Kind of funny that I just talked about Marcus's first episode revealing of him being an ultra baddie, and now we're talking about his last episode of him being an ultra baddie. This is the series finale of Lab Rats, right before Lab Rats Elite Force, and this basically puts an end to a bunch of things in Lab Rats before they move on to their sequel. The episode focuses on Donald and Douglas creating a new update for all the bionic students at the Bionic Academy and give them an upgrade into their bionics. Unfortunately, the upgrade doesn't work with Adam, Bree, and Chase because their chips are a bit older than the chips that the students have. This means that they're basically obsolete, which gets them down. However, they're kind of lucky that they didn't have this update because one by one all the bionic students, and even Daniel, who's given the update by Leo, all end up getting vanished away into Giselle Vickers' little laboratory's jail cell, where she was hoping to catch Adam, Bree, and Chase, but doesn't because they never got the upgrade. When everybody goes to save all the bionic students, they run into Giselle Vickers, who obviously fixed her broken arm situation, but has a new weapon on her hands, that being Marcus Davenport, who was last seen being crushed by Douglas's house. But if you watched Bionic Action Hero, you'll know that he was found by Giselle and was going to be rebuilt. Well, this is basically the thing that we've all been waiting for since that episode. It's definitely something that I've been waiting for, and honestly, I'm pretty satisfied with how it ended up. There's a reason why this is at number 6 and why it isn't at number 1, even though it's very intense, and it's because the humor is with this. Again, I said I wasn't going to judge anything based off of the humor or anything, but this episode definitely doesn't have what it takes to be in the top 5. This is definitely on my top episodes because it definitely is intense. The return of a character after a full season and a half, it's absolutely amazing. And the fact that he has to go up against somebody that he used to work with who changed his personality just so he can help with a different situation with another villain that he never even got to meet. Oh, Jesus, I'm confusing myself. Bottom line, it was kind of intense to see Marcus go up against Douglas. Also, the ending was very nice and sweet, and it ended off in a very good note. I talked about the series finale at length in a different video, but to quickly kind of say what I said about the ending, I really enjoyed the fact that it wasn't all that sentimental. They kind of made it look like it was going to be one of those endings where Leo was in the lab alone, and he was going to remember all the good times that him and his bionic siblings had. But then he just goes after the broken parts of Marcus and finally gets his beef with him. But then Marcus comes back in android form, and now you think we're going to have the fight that we've been waiting for, but that just never happens. It was a good ending, and the cliffhanger at the end with the whole Elite Force series, that itself was pretty interesting as well. You can definitely hear at the end of the episode a little mixture to what the theme song for Elite Force is going to be, as it's more of orchestra music rather than the typical sci-fi music that Lab Rat's theme has. Overall, I thought it was a pretty good series finale and a good way to end the whole Marcus situation. He doesn't appear in Elite Force. I'm just putting that out there. Number 5. You posted what? Yes, that is exactly how you're supposed to pronounce the episode. This was a definite big episode in the series, mostly because it ended on a really badass cliffhanger, which I will touch upon in a few moments. But this episode definitely changes the whole course of the show. There's another episode that I will talk about on this list that changes a certain dynamic of the show, but this is the episode that changes everything about the show because this exposes the secret that has been held for so long in the show. The plot of the episode fits the title perfectly. A strange girl videotapes Adam, Bree, and Chase using their bionic powers. She uploads the video to the internet, and now everybody knows about their bionic secret. The FBI and all the important people, they end up finding out about this. There's plans on taking them away, doing experiments about all that stuff. While that's all going on, Douglas and Leo end up doing a little investigation to why exactly this happened, because after doing a little scan that Chase did, he realized that he didn't scan anybody around the area, but yet on security cameras, there is in fact a girl that he missed. This gives Leo and Douglas the idea to go search to find out exactly what's going on, only to find deeper and deeper that this was actually a setup by Victor Crane, who's the baddie of this season, and his new assistant S1. There are a bunch of things to focus on in this episode. First off, the fact that the secret is out, and that basically stays for, at least for the whole series, and even in the Elite Force series. The other one includes the whole situation with Leo. Like I said, in Parallel Universe, he had bionics. But if you want to consider that episode to be a little foreshadowing for this episode, that is partially okay, I guess, because in this episode, Leo officially gets bionics, and this is because his arm gets crushed after S1 does a little bionic magic and brings one of the walls on the ceiling in the school down to his arm, where he gets crushed. And it basically, we don't actually see the arm, but it's described to be very gruesome. Very dark for Disney Channel. As always, at the end of the episode, the main characters always end up winning, but there's a little twist at the end that actually ends on a little cliffhanger and then a bigger cliffhanger. The little cliffhanger is the government is going to accept these bionic humans, but they're going to work for the government rather than work for Donald anymore. And the biggest one is that Victor Crane has a whole bionic army that he's unleashing onto the bionic teens now. That just basically blew my mind and made me really interested in the show. Like, I was interested before, but that itself, it was just, oh my god, this is pretty epic. This was definitely an epic episode, and there's a reason why it's on this list, and I think you might know why. Number 4. On the Edge. This episode I think was originally called Blindsided. I'm not exactly sure with that name. I know that was the working title for it. I guess On the Edge fits as well because they were hanging on the edge. I had a lot of high hopes for this episode, but I was majorly disappointed with the episode. But there's a specific reason why it's number 4, because there is a positive side of this episode, but let me touch upon the downside of it. So this was an episode in season 4, and this was around the time Giselle Vickers and the return of Marcus was happening. Usually when Lab Rats does 1-hour specials like You Posted What or Bionic Showdown or something like that, it's usually very intense and focuses on one of the villains attacking the teens. Very rarely it would actually be a 30-minute episode like how Mission Space was, or Speed Trapped, or Taken. They're usually 1-hour episodes. So I had the mindset there was going to be a Giselle and possible Marcus in this episode, and there wasn't. In this episode, Adam, Bree, and Chase are going to be given awards by the president for all the times that they've helped people. Leo is a bit upset because he isn't invited to it. He had the mindset he was on the team, but I guess the president didn't think so, and so that gets Leo very upset. So he decides to start his own team with S1, who changed her name to Taylor, and another bionic soldier/student named Logan. Things get a little out of control when Leo pushes his team too hard and Taylor ends up getting injured, causing her to go blind. Leo ends up giving up the whole bionic leader thing and the bionic hero itself in total and decides to leave the island, never to return, because he messed up really big and he feels really guilty about it as he almost killed somebody. Meanwhile, as Donald, Douglas, Adam, Bree, and Chase are on their way to the ceremony a few days later, a little accident happens on the bridge that they're going over, and their limo ends up getting put on the edge of the bridge because something caused the bridge to collapse, and now they're basically in danger. So the bionic heroes that usually save the day are now trapped, and Leo and the bionic students are really the only ones that could actually save everybody. Leo has to figure out if he wants to or not, but because it's his family, he has no choice but to go, and in the end of the episode, he ends up becoming a hero, gets a medal, and even becomes a mentor of the academy. Like I was saying with the downfall, I thought maybe there would have been a villain in this episode like Giselle or Marcus, or maybe even Crane, as he was said to be dead, but maybe isn't truly dead because he's Victor Crane. He's awesome. Turns out in the end the bridge actually just collapsed because of natural causes. I don't exactly remember what happened to the bridge, but no villains infiltrated the bridge whatsoever. It wasn't a setup, it wasn't anything. This just happened because of an accident that happened, and yeah, it was kind of disappointing. But on the positive sides, there were a few things I did like about the episode, like the fact that Leo finally gets everything that he's wanted since the series begun. Ever since he found out about the bionic teens, he's been wanting to be part of the team. It wasn't until Rise of the Secret Soldiers that he actually became part of the team, and he felt very invincible. Throughout Season 4, we've seen that he's tried being the hero on the team, but this is the episode that proves that he was officially a great hero. He becomes a mentor at the academy, and it's kind of amazing because when the academy was first built, he went from beginner all the way to mentor, which shows that he in fact did it. Before I move on to the next one, I just want to point out something very interesting that I actually saw online, and I didn't think about this at first when watching it, and you may not as well, but On the Edge actually has two big ironic moments happen to both Douglas and S1, who were both villains at one point in the show. They both are put into certain situations that they have caused once before, which is pretty interesting. So Leo ends up pushing Taylor too hard to the point where she ends up becoming blind. Leo has intentionally caused her to damage something on her body. The same thing happened in You Posted What, when Taylor caused Leo to break his arm and then basically have it stitched up by Douglas, and that's how he got his bionics. The same thing can be said for Douglas, although in a different sense. In Douglas's case, he's stuck in a limo that he can't get out of and is about to plummet into the ocean. Something very similar happened to Leo that Douglas basically caused, because in the Season 2 premiere Speed Trapped, Leo was locked inside of Davenport's self-driving car, and it was on its way to the Pacific Ocean where Leo was about to plummet into the ocean and basically die. That was technically sabotaged by Marcus, but Marcus has a connection with Douglas as Douglas is his master and everything, so it's a bit ironic to see these things happen to villains that are now good. Think about that next time you see those episodes. Number 3. space colony. This definitely deserves to be number 3. It's not because of the whole issue with Adam. It's not because of the whole idea of having a colony in space. It's the fact that Victor Crane finally comes back to the show. Yeah, that's a humongous spoiler right there. They didn't even mention it in the trailer. We didn't even see him in the trailer. The creators of the show themselves even admitted on Twitter that there is going to be something in the episode that was not seen in the trailers, and it's going to be a big surprise. This was the big surprise! We knew that a character, Dr. Gao, was going to be probably the villain in this episode because he was in the trailer. But nobody expected that Victor Crane was going to be in this episode. I jumped on my couch when I saw this. It was epic! This episode basically proved that Victor Crane didn't die when we last saw him in Rise of the Secret Soldiers. He almost died, but he was eventually rescued by Dr. Gao, who fixed him up with a breathing device, and now he's in space, and he's gonna take over everyone in the colony's brains and make them all biotic, and then it's pretty interesting. You got a bionic planet, basically. It's kinda epic! Alright, I gotta tone it down a bit. I'm getting a bit too loud. The episode itself was pretty amazing, seeing Victor Crane come back. Unfortunately, this was his death in the episode, his official death. He got blown up in space, so at that point I got my high hopes up for him to be in the finale out of the way because I just knew he wasn't going to be in it. It was very impossible. That was the end of the whole Crane situation. Yeah, that's mostly the reason why it's number 3, just because of the fact that Victor Crane was in it and I had no expectations to be him being in it. I didn't even think he was going to be in it. I thought he was just going to be in the finale, but that never ended up happening. Number 2. Which father knows best? Now, if you noticed on this list, there are more episodes that focus on action-based episodes and episodes that focus on villains. Parallel Universe, the pilot, and even On the Edge don't exactly have any villains in them. In fact, Parallel Universe and the pilot really don't have any intenseness to them. This episode isn't really action-based. It's not that intense, but instead, it's more of a change in the show. I said that you posted what was definitely a big change in the whole series altogether. This episode changes the whole dynamic between Douglas and Donald's whole relationship. Because up until this point, it's been pretty bad. They really don't like each other, and even though Douglas is trying to show that he's good, Donald wouldn't accept it. It isn't until this episode that all that changes. This episode is actually the second part to what I guess you can consider a two-parter. The first part is called 3 Minus Bree, and that episode focuses on Bree not wanting to be a bionic hero anymore because she's missing out on all this stuff, and she's a teenage girl. She wants to have her own life. So she ends up destroying her bionic chip altogether and decides she doesn't want to be part of the team anymore. However, finding out that she might have just been a really big help to the team, and seeing that a recent mission almost put Donald, Adam, and Chase's lives at stake, she realizes that maybe this was a bad idea and decides to apologize and rejoin the team. That's all fine that she apologized, but there's no way for her to rejoin the team as her bionic chip is broken. That's exactly where this episode picks up. Donald tries to fix her chip, but he keeps on failing because he wasn't the one that made the chip in the first place. Leo keeps on suggesting that maybe Douglas should be the one that fixes it and we should contact him, but Donald doesn't want anything to do with Douglas because of everything that's happened up till that point. Leo, of course, goes behind Donald's back and gets Douglas to fix it, but that only makes things worse because Douglas hasn't done this in a while and it's caused a malfunction in the chip, and now Bree's life is at stake as her heart monitor is going very fast because she can't stop her speed. The reason why this changes the whole dynamic between Donald and Douglas is because in the end they end up working together, and Douglas even thinks that maybe, just maybe, his relationship with Donald has fixed and maybe they can get Davenport Industries back together and back the way that it used to be. Donald unfortunately won't accept that because of everything that's happened and kicks his brother out of his life. He thanks him for helping, but he wants nothing to do with him anymore. The main thing that really changes this episode is the line that Donald says, "Everyone deserves a second chance," which is actually contradicting at the time that he says it because he forgives Bree for giving up on him, but he doesn't forgive Douglas even though he wants forgiveness from his brother. Just so you know, the reason why Douglas is going all soft at this point of the series is because of the whole Victor Crane thing. Crane was Douglas's partner, and Crane then overpowered Douglas. Now Douglas is afraid because Crane wants to go after Adam, Bree, and Chase and kill them basically, but Douglas is their dad. He doesn't want anything bad to happen to them. He wants forgiveness from his brother, but his brother just won't accept it. That is until the end of the episode when he thinks over what Bree said and decides to finally let his brother back into his life, give him a home, which is his house, and fix up any loose ends that they've had. This changes the dynamic of them throughout the show and throughout the whole entire series up until Elite Force. It's at this point of the series where it's finally confirmed Douglas is officially on the good side and he's not going back to the bad side. Which is pretty impressive because I would have expected by, I don't know, maybe the 4th season he would have gone back to being evil. Pretty cool to see the change. I really like the little conversations that they have together and seeing Donald and Douglas work together. It's like we glimpsed into their past for a brief moment. And finally, the #1 episode of Lab Rats that I consider my favorite is No Going Back. Yeah, this is a pretty dark episode, but it's the main reason why I consider it probably my favorite episode. Mostly because it's the episode that got me invested into the Lab Rats series itself. This had a very dark ending. Some of you may not consider it dark, I consider it dark though. In this episode, Adam, Bree, and Chase end up revealing their secret to Principal Perry when they save her life. They all end up panicking and decide to run for the hills and basically run away from everybody because they feel that the FBI may be after them. So they leave home, they basically run away, and it isn't until Sink or Swim that we find out they're just on like a cargo ship. Meanwhile, the subplot of this episode involves Donald having trouble with his money, finding out that somebody stole from him. Leo, in this episode, ends up actually getting sick, so he's not there at school to watch over the kids. He's actually with Donald as this whole thing happens. I really like this episode because of the ending. If I didn't make that clear in the beginning, I mean, I like the ending. I want to say maybe the last 10 minutes of the episode. I could be wrong. Maybe it's less, but the ending is absolutely gorgeous. There's rarely any laugh tracks, maybe a few, but the episode just has a really dark tone to it when it ends. Donald finds out that Douglas broke out of his frozen cell and stole all of his money, and then Douglas basically puts Donald and Leo's life at stake as he blows up the lab, trapping Donald and Leo inside of the elevator. Donald's house has to be repossessed, Adam, Bree, and Chase are gone, and there's a weird masked guy working for Douglas who has bionic abilities and we don't know who he is. That is an intense ending. It's dark because Donald and Leo are upset. They are frustrated. And the ending music fits it perfectly. I think the episode ended perfectly, and it was that scene that got me interested into the series because it showed a lot of mystery, it made me have a lot of questions, and it really wasn't until Sink or Swim when they introduced Victor Crane that really got me hooked onto the show. But this episode was a great start to actually getting me invested to see what exactly happens, how this is going to play out, and what's at stake for the rest of the show here. It was honestly a perfect Season 2 finale, which I think maybe I should have mentioned. It was the Season 2 finale. I don't know why Season 2 finales are always pretty intense. There's a reason why I say that. Just wait in 2 weeks. So, those are my favorite episodes of Lab Rats. Maybe that's the last time I talk about Lab Rats on the show. Who really knows? Maybe there's another one coming up. I honestly don't know. Now I want to hear from you people. What do you think of my list if you watched Lab Rats? Do you think the list is accurate? Do you agree with my list? Do you not agree with my list? Also on that topic, what is your favorite show and what are your top 5 or 10 favorite episodes of them? Do you agree or disagree with anything that I said in this video? Tell me in the comments and also leave me your suggestions for every movie, TV show, or random thing you want me to talk about next. Thanks for watching The Wild Review. I'm The Wild Reviewer, and you just saw me review a thing. Oh boy, wow, that was an interesting episode, but next week is going to be even more interesting, because I'm going to touch upon a show that none of you may have heard of before, but I think maybe need to be given a second chance. Tune in next week to figure out exactly what I'm talking about.
Like wildlife.